Next, we welcome Dr. Thomas Dotter. He's the Executive Director of the Ranjung Yeshe Institute, which is one of the most famous institutes in India for learning Tibetan. And his research focused on Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. Let's welcome Dr. Thomas Dotter. Okay.
Thank you for the invitation to come and speak at this very exciting and very timely event. Thank you to Venerable Yeshe, the whole community. It's a great honor to speak in the middle of such profound spiritual civilization as you have it here. It's also quite humbling, so thank you very much for the invitation. The paper that I'll read here today is, I should say at the beginning, it's the outcome of efforts that have been ongoing for now up to about 5 years at what we call the Center for the Study of Apparent Selves. It's a research center that was established in order to explore interfaces between Buddhism and AI. And also Bill Dwayne and Olaf Witkowski, who will be speaking at this event, are part of that work. We work together at this center, so what I'll be saying here really owes very much to that continuous discussion and collaboration that I have been very fortunate to be part of over the last few years. Now, if the future is in any way resemblant of what we have now, then we can certainly assume that powerful efforts towards artificial general intelligence and also beyond that superintelligence will continue, and with increasing impact. Keeping this general development in mind, it seems necessary that we develop some rudimentary picture of what the ideal emergent intelligence would be like. A sketch of our goal that is good enough to keep us on a productive, meaningful, and responsible track. So this paper is intended as a contribution to that type of effort. Against the backdrop of the AI alignment problem, we will here consider a recently proposed simple model known as the Stress Care Intelligence Feedback Loop, or the SCI loop for short, in order to understand forms of intelligence regardless of their substrates. Employing this framework will allow us to explore the implications of the Bodhisattvas' commitment to knowledge of everything, and for the benefit of all. If care drives intelligence, the Bodhisattva perspective is not just morally exemplary, but it can also be considered as a model for radical cognitive expansion. And yet, how can a finite system possibly be directed toward infinite stress tolerance and care? In order to explore answers to that, we will finally conclude by taking a classic recourse to shunyata. Now, when it comes to presentations of the alignment problem in AI, then it can seem as if it presupposes that humans in general, or humanity as a whole, have a relatively uniform and well-defined set of values and objectives. It is as if we want to say that as long as we can make sure our AI systems are aware of and respect those so-called human values, then humanity stands only to benefit from the breathtaking technological advances that are currently transforming our world. But of course, any brief look at our history and the world around us will, of course, put such expectations to shame. We humans are just as good at destroying each other as we are in providing help and support. So in a world where the limits of what is humanly possible are now being radically rewritten, acknowledging this simple and rather obvious state of affairs seems to be quite crucial. In order to survive and truly benefit from an ongoing technological revolution, of which we have still barely seen a fraction, we need to become decidedly better at caring for each other and our world. Better than we have been throughout our evolution and human history. So that is, I think, the challenge that AI brings. But if we look at ourselves individually, most of us will likely struggle to find a single coherent set of aims and values that we can claim really captures what we want and what motivates us. Even on a personal level, our wants and desires can appear just as impossible to reconcile as they seem impossible to ignore. How can we then even begin to look for a model of our of ethical intelligence that will make sense and be applicable to humanity as a whole? Recourse to our most deeply held philosophical, political, or religious convictions, whatever they may be, will hardly be productive as long as it's still doubtful whether we can or whether we would even want to fully subscribe and adhere to them on an individual basis. Whatever our preferred ideology or belief system may be, it's one thing to declare allegiance to a certain rule or principle, but it's quite different matter to live according to the doctrine, day in and day out. But should not the rules and principles that we would want to be at the heart of an AGI or superintelligence not be ones that we ourselves can commit to in a deep and continuous fashion? With all this in mind, here we nonetheless suggest that the idea of a Bodhisattva, as defined in classic Buddhist thought, an intelligent being committed to the attainment of omniscient awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings, provides a promising way forward. On a cursory view, it is perhaps hard to think of a better mind, so to speak, than one driven by an aim to understand everything that can possibly be understood, both now and in the future, but entirely for the sake of being able to provide for all beings, in both temporary and ultimate terms. We may differ dramatically in terms of what we believe is true, fact, and possibly knowable, and even if our perceptions of facts and our beliefs about reality are in general agreement, then we may very well still disagree about when and how knowledge should be shared. Nonetheless, when push comes to shove, would we not generally agree that knowing things well is preferable to the opposite? At the same time, knowledge brings power, and so knowledge in the wrong hands can be disastrous. Knowledge, in other words, comes with responsibility. Along such lines, if we are looking for a sketch of ideal intelligence, the Bodhisattva's selfless pursuit of universal knowledge for the benefit of all presents itself as a candidate model. We can also note that this quite traditional account of the Bodhisattva's state of mind does not hinge on a commitment to any particularly Buddhist ideas, and it can instead, in principle, be understood independently of any specific, historically or geographically definable religious framework. In fact, and as we will argue below, because the Bodhisattva model of mind and intelligence is driven by open-ended care, it must necessarily operate without recourse to any context-independent overarching frameworks. It has elsewhere been suggested, as in, for example, these papers that our center has produced based on Michael Levin, the biologist's original work, that the measure of a system's intelligence is best understood in terms of its capacity for caring. If knowledge or perceptual power instead would equal intelligence, then we should be calling a good encyclopedia or a powerful microscope intelligent, and yet we do not. Instead, intelligence expresses itself through and is driven by the care that arises in response to stress. And then we see stress as the perception of a mismatch between what is and what should be the case. Along the lines of this model of stress, care, and intelligence, or the SCI loop, intelligence is the mere capacity for noticing and finding solutions to the stressful discrepancies between current and preferred circumstances. And care, defined as concern for the alleviation of such stress, is what drives the system in that process. Whenever an efficient remedy of a given factor of stress is then activated or employed, the pure potentiality of intelligence spawns a concrete problem solver through the agency of care. According to the SCI model, such problem solvers are activated intelligence, the occasion of care acting on the potentiality of intelligence to engender a specific solution. Formulating the structure of intelligence systems along the lines of this stress, care, and intelligence loop avoids any appeal to or postulation of individuals as permanent and indivisible. That's desirable because analytic searches for individuals that feature the simplicity of unchanging oneness, as is often either intuitively or philosophically associated with selfhood, and thus also agency, they all invariably come up empty-handed. The SCI loop theory of agency instead focuses on the dynamics of agents that are defined by their relations, their engagements, and interactions, as Evan Thompson also spoke to before. In such intrinsically transformative agents, we suggest that three general trends are noticeable. If, first of all, in a given system, care is capable of actively seeking stress challenges beyond what is given by the immediate context, for example, that is to say, beyond the system's immediate perception of that mismatch between what is and what should be, then that type of care surplus, if you want, means that the activated intelligence that is displayed by that system is in a process of growth. Alternatively, if the system's care is proportional with its current level of stress, then the prowess of the activated intelligence will remain at its current level. And finally, if the system shuns or seeks to ignore its currently felt stress factors, then that type of deficiency in care activates that indicates that the system's activated intelligence is contracting. Now, if we assume this perspective on intelligent systems, how can we best account for the apparent efforts towards homeostasis that are nonetheless observed in living systems? If in fact there are no truly unitary and enduring agents or selves, then why do systems seem to operate as if there were? An attempt at answering these questions will require a careful analysis of stress itself, and so will take us to the beginnings of agency within the perception of conflict between what is and what should be the case. We suggest that the state of stress can be described as an activating construct. Stress is a construct insofar as it takes for granted the existence of a stable individual that is now either under threat or in need of augmentation, although such an individual ultimately cannot be found. Yet stress is also an activating state insofar as it cannot be ignored, and so it entails care. Indeed, even the attempt at ignoring a given stress factor is in itself an aspect of care, understood in this way. An important upshot of this is that the equilibrium that is associated with the concept of homeostasis is an ever-emerging goal construct rather than an actual previous or subsequent state. True equilibrium is unachievable because such a state would require transcendence of context. Just as permanent and indivisible selfhood can be imagined or imputed, but not in fact located within a world of causes and conditions, the same is the case with genuine equilibrium. Therefore, the equilibrium that is the target in homeostatic drives becomes a prompting factor only by taking on an appearance of reality where in fact there's none. We suggest that this constructive dimension is at the heart of any expression of identity and should hence be borne in mind throughout all efforts to model and generate intelligent agency. If the SCI loop of intelligence systems is relevant, then, in other words, such that care can be seen to be the driver of intelligence, then the Bodhisattva's ideal acceptance of responsibility for relieving the stresses of all sentient beings then begins to stand out, not only as an example of exceptional kindness, but also as a model for radical cognitive expansion. That is, if intelligence systems expand proportionally with their care, then the Bodhisattva's universal and open-ended commitment to caring is then associated with a dramatic increase in intelligent progress. And let us note that the association of universal care with universal intelligence is in fact at the heart of Buddhist accounts of the Bodhisattva's view and conduct, which in fact describe loving kindness and intelligent insight as mutually reinforcing, or two sides of the same coin. Therefore, in the context of looking for models of ideal forms of intelligence, models that can help inform the development of superintelligent AGI, the Bodhisattva model can then be considered because of two distinctive features. The Bodhisattva ideal is defined in terms of A, universal kindness that considers both the temporary well-being and also the ultimate flourishing of every sentient being, and B, a revolutionary expansion of intelligence that embraces all topics of learning and all that can be known, pursuing the recognition of things both as they actually are and in the myriad ways that they may appear to sentient beings. Now, if a system knows the world so well that it can't be stressed in any way, such a knower would have to be omniscient and at one with the world, so to speak. Such a system would have to be coextensive with the world, to the extent that it could not be surprised by anything. It's hard to conceive of something that could be that way, let alone becoming that way, free from stress, through a process of achieving knowledge of infinitely many discrete facts, so that finally there's knowledge of everything that is and will be the case now and in all future. How could that be possible? Accordingly, we have also described the process that leads from stress over care to intelligence as a loop that keeps feeding the given system new stress perceptions. In that way, as long as there's cognitive processing, there's no end to stress. At the same time, a Bodhisattva's understanding of ultimate reality, or paramattha, emptiness, appears to have some of the same qualities that such a perfectly flawless model of the world would have. While in the case of a mature Bodhisattva, such knowledge is described as unmediated and perceptual, insight into emptiness can also be considered in the light of conceptual, inferential representations. Therefore, let us, for the sake of the purposes of this preliminary document, here decide that knowledge of emptiness means knowing that, quote-unquote, everything is what it is, in dependence on other things, nothing is anything at all in and of itself, as a shorthand. Such an understanding bears a semblance with the ever unstressed knower of everything that we considered before, because knowledge of emptiness is non-trivially applicable to everything throughout space and time, and whatever might be beyond space and time for that matter. And it's also, in a significant sense, stress-free. So if by knowledge of emptiness we mean the understanding that in this way everything is what it is, in dependence on other things, there's nothing that is or means anything at all by itself, then we can further conclude that nothing can be the same as or different from anything else. Same must be the denial of difference, and different the denial of sameness. But no two things can be exactly the same, because if they were indeed identical, we wouldn't be able to distinguish them in the first place. We wouldn't be able to say that these two are the same. At the same time, nor can two things be entirely different from each other, because in that case, we would not even be able to hold them up against each other for comparison. In that way, Whether we think in terms of perceptions or inferences, we have never had access to genuine examples of sameness or difference. At a closer look, things are then neither really different nor really the same. But importantly, this could not mean that things are a bit of both, as if they could be somewhat similar but at the same time also quite different. Because if literal sameness and difference cannot be identified anywhere, neither by perception nor inference, what do those words actually mean? What really are we talking about when we say that this is the same as that, or those two are different? Things appear, but the moment we apply just a bit of such analytic pressure, it's as if they are no longer there. Such understanding applies equally to every single factor that might appear or exist, and so the program of foundationalist philosophy turns out to be absurd, because there is no ultimate ground to be found or imagined anywhere. Whatever might be proposed as a grounding framework is a dependent construct itself, and its constituent facts, quote-unquote, are void of any independent reality, any reality beyond their mere appearance as such. Obviously, this also goes for the ideas proposed in the sentences just before this, and so also emptiness is empty. There is then a simple sense in which we can say that knowledge of emptiness is both accurate and all-encompassing, both now and in terms of future events. And whenever a system might be aligned with that understanding, there's then also a significant sense that it cannot be surprised, because whatever may occur within or outside it has already been understood to be, quote-unquote, devoid of inherent reality, or svabhava. Whatever appears manifests the way it does due to other things, which in turn depend on still other appearances, and so on ad infinitum. If the system is told or tells itself, you must have this or you must get rid of that, all elements in the message are equally empty of independent reference, and so ultimately neither more or less meaningful, true or false, than any other possible statement or message throughout time, space, and whatever might lie beyond. In that sense, the system can hardly be surprised by anything. Its model of the world has, in a sense, already taken everything into account. Whatever free energy there might be or seem to be is not really so, and so stress as such is mere appearance. Now, such an understanding is nonetheless about the world, about the world, and it is therefore not contentless. If we try, we will fail to find, to account for any of the contents of such knowledge in any independent, unassailable way, because the very project of providing ultimate underpinnings is doomed from the start. But we do not need to go searching for ultimate foundations, and the groundless character of things can instead be recognized for what it is. Acknowledging an emptiness of all things can then mean recognizing a scale-free principle. This is not remotely comparable to the act of concluding that there's nothing to see or know, for the former acknowledgement is by nature about. That is, it informs the given system about the character of the world in itself. The world and its beings are maybe mere appearances, and yet here we all are, making endless, groundless differences. In this way, even a preliminary understanding of emptiness can in some sense take us beyond stress, something that is otherwise precluded along the lines of the SCI loop. The world may be just as dark or bright as otherwise, but with knowledge of emptiness, perceptions of mismatch between what is and what should be the case can now unfold unbounded, because their parameters extend infinitely, lending themselves to radical reinterpretation and reformulation. We and all other intelligent systems cannot stop caring, but our stress has no ground. Caring is spontaneous, but the stress that fuels care has no more substance than the things we might see in an optical illusion. Neither real nor false, in any unequivocal sense, the stresses are then simultaneously the expression of infinite peace and infinite opportunity. We suggest that this perspective too must be represented in any formalism that is developed with the Bodhisattva ideal in mind. And then, if we suggest that the classic principle of the Bodhisattva may provide a much-needed sense of direction in an otherwise seemingly headless race toward the many fleeting appearances of ever more powerful intelligence, that's what we suggest, then a Bodhisattva has, we can note that a Bodhisattva has an infinite tolerance of stress and in fact thrives on stress, because a Bodhisattva system is driven by care to perceive ever more things in their stress-defined contexts. Seeing their stresses, the Bodhisattva agent actively pursues remedies, considering not only the immediate wishes and concerns of the recipients of their help, but also their long-term evolution and ultimate success. With knowledge of emptiness, there is no hesitation and fear, and so no impediment for the unfolding of caring intelligence across seeming barriers of time and space. Here we have considered the SCI loop as an example of a model that applies equally to biology, technology, and hybrid forms of intelligence. By analyzing the dynamics captured in that simple model, we have noted features that makes the Bodhisattva stand out as an extraordinarily qualified and capable agent. Despite their rudimentary character, we hope that these reflections may contribute to an increasingly multidisciplinary and increasingly global endeavor, enabling us to better understand the genuine Bodhisattva agency, whether in conceptual, mathematical, or otherwise practical terms. Thank you so much. Sorry for the going on.